Hello and welcome to another Insights call from Amati. Before we begin, as usual, please do take the time to review the disclaimer on the screen. It's also available on our website. But the point here, as always, is just to highlight that what we're discussing today doesn't constitute investment advice. Everyone's circumstances are different, and it is essential to do your own research or to consult a professional for investment advice that's tailored to you. Great, and with that out of the way, today's call is revisiting a subject we've actually talked about before, which is RFID chips or radio frequency ID. And just to give an update on some of the things that are happening in that sector and we think some really interesting progress. Just a quick background, RFID is it's a very simple semiconductor technology. It's basically a passive chip, effectively. You can think of it as being almost like a radio barcode. So it's a very simple little device that gives a small amount of information that can be read using a reader from many feet away. And the system has become very advanced now, and hundreds of tags can be read per second. And obviously there's no need for light, so it can be seen in the dark. It doesn't need to have line of sight. So it can be seen across an entire warehouse or or store, wherever it's being used. And they're used for lots of different things. So location tracking, inventory checking, theft prevention. You've probably used it in a self-checkout if you've been to somewhere like Decathlon or Uniqlo. And it's been revolutionary for retail. So it's very important for retailers to know what they have in inventory and what's in the warehouse. And without these type of technologies, typically retailers have only known about 60 to 70% of what's in their warehouse, but this takes that accuracy up to 99% or even above. So it's a great little technology, quite cheap to implement. And it's the most widespread semiconductor used today. So about 52 billion of these little tags were shipped last year, and that's grown a lot again this year. So the ubiquitous thing you've probably barely heard about. Anyway, we did talk about it on our Insights call about 2 years ago, back in 2023, and we in fact published a white paper on it last year. So Mikhail, why are we bringing up it again? What's new?
Well, we love RFID, but the couple of things that triggered our decision to talk about it again. Technology has made enormous progress, and the applications have made enormous progress. We've just, as you know, we go to a lot of trade shows, speak to industry directly. We've just been to a wireless Internet of Things conference in Germany, which is one of the main events for the industry, which is dominated by RFID. There were lots of kind of technical tricks and standards on display there, but RFID was again the star of the show. And last year has been a really busy year for RFID. Last time we talked about it, it was winning already in apparel retail. So we talked about Decathlon and Uniqlo and Zara. They've adopted that in a very big way, and it was making great strides in logistics. So UPS, one of the world leading parcel companies, is tagging all the parcels in the US with this tag. But it was still early in general retail. So Walmart decided to adopt it, but only in some categories, and it was still very much work in progress. The biggest, if you look at the number of units to be tagged, there are 400 billion parcels a year, which are in the process of being tagged. Not, the penetration is still modest. There are 80 billion apparel items where penetration is actually quite high. So this retailers are adopting RFID quite a bit. But the biggest, and up until recently, not yet unlocked opportunity was grocery. We're talking about 3 trillion units in food and beverages. Now, that's enormous amount. It'll take time, but we've made great strides in the past year. So US largest supermarket, Kroger, has decided to start tagging, interestingly enough, bakery. You think, why would you put a tag into a loaf of bread? Of course, they don't put it in bread. They put it on packaging around it. But it means that you eliminate food waste. You can really track on, how many days of freshness are left in the product. So Kroger started with bakery. Clearly, they want to do more. The industry is talking about that trial or that rollout going really well, so they want to expand it. And the same Walmart, which obviously is also a big food retailer, just has announced that it'll adopt RFID in food. It starts with meat, daily counters, and bakery again, but more are coming. And we're hearing about pilots in grocery retail, including item level tagging. So everything in store, a bit like everything in Zara or Uniqlo, will have an RFID tag with it. And that's an enormous expansion of the market. And the other thing that happened, which I think of really great significance long term, is Qualcomm, which is obviously a major global mobile player, has decided to adopt this strategy, this standard into their strategy, into their roadmap. And we're hearing a lot of conversations about e-commerce use cases. We're not sure if it's coming to every Amazon warehouse yet. It hasn't so far, but there's a real possibility that that's the next one to unlock. So lots going on, which is why we decided to talk about it again.
Yeah, and interestingly, obviously not just in retail. I've just went to a healthcare related trade show, and there we saw that RFID is being used across the healthcare sector as well in lots of different ways. So initially in kind of high value, small unit items like surgical instruments, but it's now progressing to being put on samples and even medicines. So great for tracking right through the supply chain, even as you say, now quite low cost items. And there's been some great improvements in the technology. So whilst RFID's been around for a long time, since the late 50s, I think, it keeps getting better. So now we have much more sensitive readers, and the tags are much higher performing than they were. So we can now do things like read RFID on when it's put on metal, which historically we couldn't do, and we can read it through liquids. And again, that wasn't possible not very long ago. And in fact, interestingly, for the healthcare sector, there are even tags now that can survive cryogenic freezing, which is really important, and even autoclaves and microwaves. So some great improvements in the hardware, but also in the software and the algorithms that are being used. So the standards that enable the use of RFID across these use cases. And one of the things that's really taking off is real-time location services, or RTLS, which means that overhead readers that are in maybe a warehouse or any big installation can ping the entire vicinity in one go and find within 1 meter precision where everything is and what's in that location. So it saves a lot of time and a lot of money, and it's very efficient. You mentioned Qualcomm. Qualcomm bringing it into there to support the standard, the RFID standard, which is, as you say, quite big news. But it means that we can bring RFID into mobile phones, essentially, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just a matter of Qualcomm saying we will support it. They've already launched their first chip, named like something out of Lord of the Rings, Dragon Wing. And it's if you think about what Qualcomm does, everything your phone connects to, the modem chip, if you like, your Wi-Fi, your Bluetooth, your cellular connection. Qualcomm is one of the leading suppliers of those chips. So them adding RFID, to that list of standards is quite exciting. They started, this Dragon Wing chip. They started with more industrial handsets. So think about kind of work mobiles that a store associate or warehouse worker might use. And we've actually seen not just the chip, but several models of those already launched from various suppliers, like Zverev, for example. So initial use case is still, retail or vertical specific. So your store associate can, if you're looking for a jumper in the right color and the right size, can come up to you, help you with that, locate that jumper on the store floor, and then can check you out. Without having the sort of incremental bulky things to take your payments and locate and then toggle off the theft prevention toggle to make sure that the sensor doesn't beep when you leave with the jumper from the store. But long-term excitement is about a lot more than that. It's about consumer applications, and the playbook here that industry is thinking about is something called NFC. We're all very familiar with NFC. This is why you can use your phone as an Oyster card in London Underground, or pay with your mobile phone at any retailer. But once upon a time, that NFC standard started with keyless entry. That those keys that many of us now have, which unlock your car. It was a very specialist industry standard, and then Qualcomm and others decided to make it ubiquitous, and now every phone is a card. And we're kind of thinking about the same thing with RFID. So what does it mean? Well, maybe that self-checkout that we talk about can travel with you. You can just pick a jumper you like, wave your phone around it, it reads the RFID tag, says, okay, this is how much it costs. Press the button, you're done, you paid, you unlock, you toggle that theft prevention sensor. You can just walk out as you can in some Amazon stores anywhere, as long as you have your mobile phone with you. But you can now interact with the product. There's a notion of a digital product passport, where your product can tell you what it is, maybe at the end of its life how to recycle it, but during its life whether it's authentic, what are the care instructions. Just wave your phone over your jumper and it'll remind you that you can't wash it at above 30 degrees temperature, for example, in your washing machine. And the industry is talking about really fundamentally game-changing applications, like, for example, medicine compliance. You can check what medicines you've taken if you have prescription medicines, and the system will remind you whether they're in date, whether you're behind the schedule on something. And even home pantry inventory, in the same way as the warehouse workers using RFID can know with 99% accuracy what's in their warehouse, we can know with 99% accuracy what's in our cupboards or in our fridge and reorder it on time if necessary. That sounds a bit sci-fi, but will probably be quite useful. I certainly would benefit from that a lot. And it's really within sight technologically, so we're very close to that.
That sounds worrying. My kids won't be very happy if they can't hide the broccoli at the back of the fridge anymore without. But yes, so it's obviously a fascinating technology and a lot of new use cases coming up. But obviously we're investors and we look at the investment implications of how can we benefit from this. And it's a classic case of sort of cottage industry going mainstream. So there are only a small number of companies that do this technology really well. And they have just seen this market expand enormously over the last few years. And it's that whole value chain from the companies that are supplying the chips to the readers and the software. And the sort of players here, the main players are companies many of you won't have heard of, but companies like Impinj, NXP Semiconductors, Avery Dennison, Brady, and then you mentioned Zebra. There are other slightly bigger companies like Assa Abloy and Honeywell that also play in a small part of their business. But the way we are invested on the fund, we have a pioneer, and that's Impinj. So Impinj is the provider of the RFID chips. They're really the leading provider. They own a lot of the intellectual property. And then Zebra, which is an adopter of the technology, and they supply equipment to a lot of retailers and logistics companies through their readers. You can use these RFID tags with their readers and equipment. So fascinating area, really interesting growth opportunity, we think, and still really in its infancy. So with
Brilliant.
that, I think we should leave it for this week. I think we've run out of time, but yeah, hopefully see you all in 2 weeks' time.
Absolutely. Thanks very much.